I think going forward, the Commonwealth has got a visibility problem, it's got a communications problem, and it's also got an identity problem.
We're taking a look at the Commonwealth. The CHOGM Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting starts in Rwanda this week. Prince Charles will be there as the sort of head of Commonwealth designate. The Queen hasn't travelled there for some time. But what's it like to organise one of these things? Lord McDonald, Simon McDonald, former head of the Foreign Office, joins me in the studio. Morning, Simon.
Morning, Matt.
Nice to have you with us. We've also got Sue Onslow, Director of the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, on the line. Morning, Sue.
Good morning to you.
Well, I'll speak to you in just a moment, Sue, about the point of all of this. Simon, first of all, just explain the logistics. What is it now? 54 countries in the Commonwealth. Presumably, all the heads of government come, and they all think they're the most important person. How do you make sure that everyone feels equally special?
That's exactly right. 54 and continuing to expand. And helpfully, in protocol terms, they are all equivalent. So they are all treated in the same dignified way. But when there are so many, that involves a huge amount of accommodation and transport and security, which is what happened in London in April 2018.
At the time, the biggest collection of world leaders in Britain.
Exactly. Everybody knew it was the last time that the Queen herself would be in the chair. And so more than 40 of the heads of state and government came to London for that meeting.
Because the appeal of meeting the Queen, given her long reign, is so great, does Prince Charles have the same appeal, do you think?
Well, the Queen was associated with the Commonwealth from the beginning of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So, yes, that is unique and irreplaceable. But one of the outcomes of 2018 was the agreement by everybody that Prince Charles will, in due course, be the next head of the Commonwealth. So he has the job.
He's got the job. And what's the point of it? Because the countries, you've got huge countries and tiny countries, you've got rich countries and poor countries in every sort of part of the world. What is the point of bringing all these people together?
But in a way, that is the point. It is such a varied group, but they have some things very important in common. The link with the United Kingdom, generally through the empire, the link of the English language and the common law, media is shared. And so, and the agenda these days is shared. It's really the soft power end. They won't be discussing Ukraine so much as the environment and human rights.
Let's bring in Sue there from the Institute of Commonwealth Studies. From your point of view, what state is the Commonwealth in right now, and what is the point of this big gathering taking place in Kigali?
Thank you very much. I would agree with Valentine Lowe that the Commonwealth is at a crossroads at the moment. That Prince Charles, I also want to underline, is the ceremonial head. He's not the political head of the Commonwealth. That position is, of course, also being contested in Kigali. Simon underlined that the Commonwealth has been indelibly associated with the Queen since 1952 when she came to the throne. But I think going forward, the Commonwealth has got a visibility problem, it's got a communications problem, and it's also got an identity problem. In terms of its visibility, this is an age of single issue politics and single issue organizations. The Commonwealth did have that before in history with in the Cold War as a non-aligned grouping, and also which included, of course, Cold War groups within it, but it was very much had a non-aligned grouping. It also, of course, played a major role in the global anti-apartheid struggle. The Commonwealth has offered leadership on climate change. It has offered leadership on democracy and human rights within its members, but it certainly faces a problem of what is its legitimacy and purpose going forward. So this really does confront the organisation right now, and why leadership is a critical issue.
And Simon, where should that leadership be coming from? Is it from Prince Charles? Is it from Baroness Scotland, currently the head of the Commonwealth? Or should it be from Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister from the country around which the Commonwealth sort of rotates? Simon, yeah.
It's very important that Boris Johnson does not behave as though he is the biggest person in the room, because the whole point of the Commonwealth is equality amongst the member states. And that equality has allowed a better conversation, as Sue has been saying, about a very wide range of issues. So this variety is a challenge, but also is an explanation for why these people get together, because in an informal atmosphere. Once every couple of years, people can have face-to-face conversations about the widest possible range of subjects, all in the same language and with a lot of mindset in common. Democracy and human rights, sustainability are things that have run through the Commonwealth from the beginning, and that's the basis on which everybody's talking.
Has it been overtaken a bit by other things, though? In fact, it was literally overtaken as the biggest event of world leaders in the UK because we had COP26, which took place here. Very much focused on climate change with far more people. NATO's gone up the agenda in recent months because of the situation in Ukraine when it comes to defence. Is the fact that it can deal with anything actually the risk it ends up dealing with nothing?
No one international organisation these days can deal with everything, not even the United Nations. The United Nations has now so many sub-organisations within it. Every country belongs to multiple groupings, and this is a useful element. It's not exclusive. It's not anybody's most important international grouping, but it's useful and it continues to grow. So there is interest from African countries in particular, Francophonie, in joining the Commonwealth, increasing their options.
Sue, just finally... Sorry, go on, Sue.
This question about it continuing to grow. The Commonwealth has got clear criteria for membership, but it also needs to exercise due diligence to make sure that new members comply with those criteria and the Harare principles, because otherwise it risks undermining its credibility and its legitimacy going forward.
Sue, it's good. Thanks very much for joining us. Sue Onslow there, Director of the Institute for Commonwealth Studies. Now, one of the issues, of course, is that this year it's taking place in Rwanda, particularly a place of interest following the government's deal with President Kagame to send asylum seekers there. Well, yesterday, speaking to Times Radio, President Kagame's former chief of staff, Theogene Rudasinghe, who now opposes the Rwandan government, criticised the British government for arguing Rwanda as a safe and free society.
Despite the standard kind of storyline that we hear many, many times from Rwanda and those who support it, especially those in the British government who are the architects of this policy of shipping the asylum seekers to Rwanda, the true story is that this is an autocratic, authoritarian state where the ordinary citizens don't have rights, where many people languish in jail and suffer from extrajudicial killings, where there are so many people who cannot participate in the political process or have a free press or have civil society organizations. And indeed, we have often said that Rwanda is like one giant prison with multiple prisons inside. And so taking asylum seekers there is literally condemning them to detention.
Rwanda is one giant prison, he was saying there. Simon, I suppose this is the tension, isn't there? That if you want countries to change, you have to bring them in. But then if you do that, it looks like you're in some way condoning some of what goes on there.
I mean, when you join any club, you adopt the rules of that club and you need to be held to the rules of the club, as Sue has just said. So if Gabon comes in, Gabon will be held to the standard of the Harare principles. The organisation won't flex. The new member must flex. The problems with the Rwanda asylum policy are not principally to do with Rwanda, in my view. It's that the United Kingdom is not fulfilling its obligations to asylum seekers.
Do you think when Boris Johnson goes to Rwanda and tries to make the case to other countries to improve human rights, as we were just discussing, is one of the things that the Commonwealth can do, is that job made harder by the way that the government is behaving towards asylum seekers, do you think?
It will be an element for sure. But part of the deal with Rwanda is that asylum seekers or people claiming asylum will be treated in a certain way, with a certain dignity, and that will be monitored, and Rwanda will be kept, I assume, up to that standard.
Let's bring in Henry Zeffman. He's the Times Associate Political Editor. He'll be flying to Rwanda with the Prime Minister later this week. Henry, this is all the news coming together in one. How do you think it's going to play out politically? What does Boris Johnson want to get from this meeting this week?
Yeah, it does rather feel like the sort of hackneyed end to a TV series where all the plot strands fuse in a slightly overdone, over obvious way. Look, I think there is going to be an uncomfortable sort of dual element to Boris Johnson's presence there, or comfortable as he would have it, because I think what he wants to get out of it is, Britain's continuing place in the Commonwealth, Britain's continuing global leadership in an age of Brexit, facing outwards, global Britain, etc., etc., etc. You can insert your own buzzwords there. But also, he is going to be in Rwanda. He's going to be in Rwanda shortly after that plane with asylum seekers did not take off. And he's also going to be there with Prince Charles, who, as our colleague Matt Dathan reported, thinks the Rwanda refugee policy is appalling. So I think whatever Boris Johnson does want to achieve from the summit is going to be inevitably eclipsed, at least to some degree, by questions about his bilateral relationship with Rwanda.
And actually, there's a great piece in the Times today, I don't know if you've seen it, Simon, from Michaela Wong, looking at President Kagame furious that this policy hasn't planned out as he wanted. It was all supposed to be part of cementing Rwanda's position on the global stage, and actually you've got the heir to the throne condemning the idea of this deal is appalling, just as Prince Charles touches down.
As I've said, I think, not that Prince Charles has commented in public at all, but I assume that his problem is with the United Kingdom end of the policy rather than Rwanda. So I would not expect the Prince of Wales to have a particular problem meeting the president of Rwanda. But yes, clearly the policy has not worked out in the initial stages as President Kagame hoped. But I note that he's got 120 million British pounds out of it, so it's not been all bad for him.
It's probably not worked out too bad at all for him. And what about Boris Johnson's role on the world stage? He was obviously Foreign Secretary when you were running the Foreign Office. Does he know how to sort of manoeuvre his way through a big gathering like this?
Yes. Mr. Johnson is a very clubbable and very well-known personality. So
well liked?
For sure, for some, not for all, but for some, absolutely. And I think that he will find CHOGM one of the easier, more amiable international meetings.
Is that your sense as well, Henry? Where do you think Boris Johnson would, every week is another exercise in trying to draw a line under what happened the week before. Where would Boris Johnson like to be by the time it's wheels up and you're coming home from Rwanda?
Well, of course, this is the first of a run of 3 consecutive international summits that Boris Johnson is taking part in. So actually, he's going to be out of the country for quite some time. So he flies straight from Kigali to Bavaria, where the G7 summit is taking place. And as Lord McDonald just said, I think that's going to be tougher for Boris Johnson. That is going to be a bit more Ukraine focused. That's going to have him up with Scholz and Macron, people with whom, or people who's perhaps are a little more resistant to his clubbability than some of the CHOGM leaders might be. Should say, of course, Justin Trudeau, a fellow G7 leader, is going to be at CHOGM. But it's not going to be, I think some people in Downing Street were hoping it would be, but it's not going to be an opportunity for him to have his first meeting with Anthony Albanese, the new Australian Prime Minister, who is sending his deputy. So, there's an interesting sort of issue there where, of course, Boris Johnson is trying to pivot outwards to the world, to the Commonwealth. AUKUS is obviously a very significant trilateral pact. But perhaps Australia and New Zealand, who are also sending their foreign minister, Jacinda Ardern's not going to be in Rwanda, perhaps aren't quite as interested and a bit more interested in Asia than the UK would like them to be.
Just finally, Simon, what's the worst thing that can go wrong? Reflecting on your times of organising summits and meetings and that sort of thing.
The worst thing, I wouldn't want to speculate about that.
There's something that flashed across your mind there and you decided not to tell me
and decided to keep it to myself. Correct.
Well, we await your memoirs. We'll do that. We'll get you back another time to talk about that. Simon McDonald, Lord McDonald, former head of the diplomatic service at the Foreign Office. Thanks very much for joining us here in the studio. Henry Zeffman there, packing his bags to go and join the Prime Minister. He's about the only person the Prime Minister can get to fly to Rwanda at the moment. He'll be off to the trip to CHOGM. Henry, really good to speak to you. Thanks very much for joining us. And we'll obviously keep across the whole summit as it unfolds this week here on Times Radio.